Welcome to my channel Tales Narration. Here I narrates dramatic, cheating, revenge and betrayal stories. Today we going to narrate Cheating Wife Stories series. What the hell is going on here? The words came out sharper than he intended, slicing through the heavy silence of the room. His wife, Claire, froze mid-laugh, her hand still resting on his brother's arm. The two of them were sitting too close on the couch, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that felt wrong. Intimate. Familiar. His brother, Ethan, leaned back slowly, his expression unreadable. "Hey, man. We were just what?" he interrupted, his voice low and tight. He could feel the heat rising in his chest, a slow burn that threatened to consume him. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're doing a lot more than just talking." Claire stood up quickly, her face pale. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice trembling. But the way she avoided his eyes told him everything he needed to know. It had started innocently enough, or so he thought. Claire and Ethan had always gotten along well, but he'd never imagined it would go this far. They'd been married for 5 years, and he'd trusted her completely. Trusted both of them. But now, standing in the living room of their home, he felt like a stranger in his own life. He'd come home early from work, hoping to surprise Claire with dinner. Instead, he'd walked into a scene that made his stomach churn. The laughter he'd heard from the hallway had been light, carefree, the kind of laughter that belonged to people who didn't have a care in the world. And then he'd seen them. Claire's hand on Ethan's arm. The way they leaned into each other, their faces inches apart. The way they'd both frozen when they saw him, like they'd been caught red-handed. "You've got to be kidding me," he said, running a hand through his hair. His voice was calm now, but it was the kind of calm that came before a storm. "How long has this been going on?" Claire opened her mouth to speak, but Ethan cut her off. "It's not what you think," he said, his tone defensive. "We were just talking." "Talking?" he repeated, his voice rising. "Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I don't know what it looks like when two people are?" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The words felt too ugly, too real. Claire stepped forward, her hands outstretched like she was trying to calm a wild animal. "Please, let's just talk about this," she said, her voice pleading. "I can explain." "Explain what?" he snapped. "That you've been sneaking around with my brother behind my back. That you've been lying to me for who knows how long." She flinched at his words, and for a moment, he almost felt guilty. Almost. But then he remembered the way they'd looked together, the way they'd laughed like they didn't have a care in the world. Like he didn't exist. "I think you should leave," he said finally, his voice cold. Ethan hesitated, glancing at Claire like he was waiting for her to say something. But she just stood there, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. "Now," he added, his tone leaving no room for argument. Ethan stood up slowly, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, though it wasn't clear if he was apologizing to him or to Claire. When the door closed behind Ethan, the room felt even quieter than before. Claire was still standing in the middle of the living room, her eyes fixed on the floor. "How could you do this?" he asked, his voice breaking. "How could you do this to us?" She looked up at him then, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. It just did." "That's not good enough," he said, shaking his head. "You don't just accidentally fall into bed with someone else. Especially not my brother." She didn't respond, and the silence between them felt heavy, suffocating. He wanted to yell, to scream, to demand answers. But instead, he just stood there, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under him. The days that followed were a blur. He moved out of their house and into a small apartment, needing space to think. Claire called him constantly, leaving voicemails that he deleted without listening to. He couldn't bring himself to talk to her, not yet. Not when every time he thought about her, he saw her laughing with Ethan, their heads bent together like they were sharing a secret. It was during this time that he started spending more time with Claire's sister, Lily. She'd always been kind to him, and she seemed to understand what he was going through in a way that no one else did. They'd meet for coffee or dinner, and she'd listen as he poured out his heart, offering quiet words of comfort when he needed them most. One evening, as they sat on her couch after dinner, she turned to him and said, "You deserve better than this, you know." He looked at her, surprised by the intensity in her voice. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you deserve someone who loves you for who you are," she said softly. "Someone who would never hurt you like this." Her words struck a chord deep within him, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of hope. "Do you really think that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her eyes meeting his. "I do." And in that moment, something shifted between them. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a spark of something new, something real. Weeks turned into months, and before he knew it, he and Lily were inseparable. She was everything Claire wasn't. Kind, loyal, and fiercely protective of him. She made him laugh in a way he hadn't in years, and slowly but surely, she helped him piece his heart back together. One night, as they sat on her porch watching the stars, she turned to him and said, "I think I'm falling in love with you." His heart skipped a beat at her words, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. Then he reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," he admitted, his voice soft but steady. She smiled at him then, a smile that lit up her entire face. And in that moment, he knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The wedding was small and intimate, just the way they wanted it. As he stood at the altar waiting for Lily to walk down the aisle, he couldn't help but think about how far they'd come. She was radiant in her simple white dress, her eyes shining with happiness as she made her way toward him. When she reached him, she took his hands in hers and whispered, "I love you." "I love you too," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. As they exchanged vows and rings, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. This was it, this was the life he was meant to have. With Lily by his side, he knew that anything was possible. But as they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of their story. There was so much more to come, so many adventures waiting to be had, and he couldn't wait to see where life would take them next. As they stepped outside into the warm afternoon sun, Lily turned to him and said. As they stepped outside into the warm afternoon sun, Lily turned to him and said, her voice soft but laced with a playful edge, "I have a surprise for you tonight, something just for us, something I've never done before and I want to do it for you." He raised an eyebrow, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "A surprise? What kind of surprise?" She smiled, her bright eyes sparkling with mischief. "If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise, would it? Just trust me. You're going to love it." He chuckled, the sound low and warm. "All right, I'll bite. But you're making it hard not to guess." "Good," she teased, leaning in closer, her lips brushing against his ear as she whispered, "because I want you thinking about it all day." Her breath was warm, sending a shiver down his spine. He could feel the heat of her body, the way her presence seemed to pull him in like a magnet. "You're playing dirty," he murmured, his voice husky. "Maybe," she replied, pulling back just enough to meet his gaze. Her smile was slow, deliberate, and utterly captivating. "But you like it." He did. He liked it a lot. The way she looked at him, the way she spoke, the way she moved, it all had a way of setting his nerves on fire. And now, with this mysterious promise hanging between them, he couldn't help but feel a growing anticipation. The rest of the day passed in a blur. They spent hours laughing and talking, enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. But beneath the surface, there was a tension building, a quiet hum of excitement that neither of them could ignore. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Lily took his hand and led him inside. "It's time," she said, her voice soft but filled with an undeniable energy. He followed her without question, his heart pounding in his chest. She led him to their bedroom, where the air was thick with the scent of candles she must have lit earlier. The room was bathed in a warm, golden glow, the flickering light casting shadows that danced across the walls. "Close your eyes," she instructed, her voice barely above a whisper. He obeyed, letting his eyelids fall shut. He could hear her moving around the room, the soft rustle of fabric, the faint click of something being set down. His senses were heightened, every sound, every movement amplified. "Keep them closed," she reminded him, her voice closer now. He could feel her standing in front of him, her presence almost tangible. He nodded, his breath catching slightly as he felt her fingers brush against his chest. She began to unbutton his shirt, her touch light and teasing. Each button undone felt like a small victory, a step closer to whatever she had planned. When the last button was free, she slid the shirt off his shoulders, letting it fall to the floor. Her hands moved to his belt next, and he could feel the warmth of her skin as she worked to undo it. The sound of the buckle coming undone was loud in the quiet room, and he couldn't help but let out a low groan. "Patience," she chided softly, her voice laced with amusement. "We're just getting started." He swallowed hard, his hands itching to reach out and touch her. But he kept them at his sides, determined to let her lead. She stepped back for a moment, and he could hear her moving again, the sound of fabric sliding against skin. When she spoke again, her voice was closer, softer. "Open your eyes." He did as she asked, and the sight that greeted him took his breath away. She stood before him in a delicate lace lingerie set, the fabric hugging her curves in all the right places. The candlelight played off her skin, casting a soft glow that made her look almost ethereal. "Lily," he breathed, his voice thick with desire. "You're stunning." She smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made his heart race. "I told you it was a surprise," she said, stepping closer until they were almost touching. "But we're not done yet." He reached out to touch her, but she caught his hand, stopping him. "Not yet," she whispered, her eyes locking with his. "Tonight is about you. Let me take care of you." He nodded, his throat too tight to speak. She guided him to the edge of the bed, gently pushing him down until he was sitting. Then she knelt in front of him, her hands resting on his knees. "Just relax," she murmured, her voice soothing. "Let me show you how much I love you." Her hands moved slowly up his thighs, her touch feather-light but electric. He could feel the heat of her palms through the fabric of his pants, and it sent a jolt of pleasure straight to his core. She leaned in closer, her lips brushing against his ear as she whispered, "Are you ready?" He nodded again, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. "Yes." She smiled softly, her lips brushing against his skin as she traced a gentle path down his neck with tender kisses. Her hands moved with a quiet purpose, gliding upward until they rested lightly at the edge of his waistband. The air between them felt charged, yet her touch remained delicate, almost reverent, as if she were savoring every moment. He could feel the warmth of her closeness, the way her presence enveloped him, and it stirred something deep within, a quiet longing that words couldn't quite capture. "Lily," he groaned, his hands gripping the edge of the bed. "You're killing me." She laughed softly, the sound sending a shiver down his spine. "Good," she said, her voice filled with mischief. "Because I'm just getting started."